We crashed through the ceiling into the kind of kitchen set on a bed, and we did it for real. It's just bizarre to think of.
You fell about 20 feet or something,
25-foot drop.
The Graham Norton Radio Show
on Virgin Radio.
Is this your first memoir, Aid?
It is, my first and my last, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did you hold off till now?
Because I never really wanted to write one. And then when lockdown happened, I sort of had a moment of... I started gardening, and I've always gardened. I've won prizes for gardening.
Oh, yeah.
I haven't won any for comedy, but I won them for gardening. And I sort of had a moment of zen, like meditational calm. And the buzz that has been in my head since I was 12 disappeared. And I think I had a moment of enlightenment. And in the evenings, I was filling it with scanning every photograph in the house to make, an archive for the family, and sort of all the memories started coming in, and the book just kind of poured out of me.
Wow.
It was really quite cathartic and really good fun.
Yeah. There's a weird thing, because we're kind of an age.
Yeah.
And there's a weird thing.
Ancient.
But is that weird thing that when we talk about our childhoods...
Yeah.
You feel like it could have been 150 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, because... And particularly your childhood, because you were kind of an army kid.
Yeah.
Tell us about some of the places you lived.
I lived in Cyprus, Bahrain and Uganda. Although I didn't really live in Uganda because they sent me away.
Yes, quite quickly.
So I lived in a sort of something masquerading as a school, but was actually a prison in East Yorkshire for most of my teens.
And all of that does sound... It sounds almost medieval.
It's quite brutal, yes. I when I first started writing it, I found I'd written 12,000 words about corporal punishment. Because I was beaten very regularly.
Yeah.
At any opportunity with sticks and various other things, conkers, slippers. And my editor said, this is just too much. You're going to have to, condense this.
Tone it down.
So I brought it down to 6,000 words about corporal punishment, and I hope they're kind of funny at the same time as being rather vicious.
And but also very true. Like, I think a lot of people will read it and kind of go, "Oh yeah, I remember that."
And it's obviously where a lot of my comedy comes
that
from.
was the clearly,
When I was a kid, my parents sent me away to boarding school, and I only used to go home twice a year. And I used to stay with my grandma and granddad, who were very strict Methodists. No fun around their house at all. And one day, it was obvious that Grandad was out and Grandma was very worried, and she thought he'd fallen into the arms of Beelzebub, and which to you and me means he'd gone for a drink. And when he came back, he sort of gingerly put his head round the corner of the door, and she rushed in from the kitchen and hit him with a frying pan.
Wow.
So, I mean, that's always been,
That's textbook Adrian Edmondson.
It's Fellini. It's a Fellini moment in my head.
Yeah. I'm sure it wasn't funny at the time.
It was hilarious.
Then your name is a big issue.
Yeah.
Why do you not like your name?
Well, because when I was a kid, in the times, I was going to school, I went to a different school every year, and at every school they'd say, "Oh, Adrian, it's a girl's name. Oh, you must be a girl. You get a girl's name," and it never really went away. And in my teenage years, Adrian Street turned up as a wrestler on the telly. Do you remember Adrian Street?
Yes,
sort of flamboyantly dressed with sort of, he had ponytails and wore glittery eye makeup, and this was my name. And then Rocky came once I got to university. Rocky started, and the girlfriend was called Adrian. It just never stopped.
And then there's a weird... You tried to change it when you joined Equity.
Well, I thought I was... we eventually came up with the name Eddie Monsoon. Because it's a kind of shortening of... Well, it's a lengthening of Edmondson.
Yeah.
And I thought that's brilliant. And I went in the next day and told the production assistant, I'm going to be called Eddie Monsoon, because that first instant is when you can decide.
Yeah.
And she'd already sent the forms in.
So, is that
so Jennifer stole it.
Yeah, I was going to say, it didn't go to waste.
Okay, I think it's had a slightly better career without me.
Often, when you read a showbiz memoir, you're following a career path.
Yeah.
And what strikes me about you and your kind of contemporaries
is that I haven't had a career.
Well, no, that you were kind of building the path as you went along. Like no one had. You were the first.
Yeah.
Like now, people can follow what you guys did, but then no one had done it.
When we started off, when Rik and I left uni, we couldn't get into equity, and so we became comedians by accident because the way-in was through variety contracts. And then we tried to get into that kind of working man's club circuit, and they heard our accents and they just said no. So we had to kind of form our own venues. So we invented the Comic Strip Club and a club called Pentameters and all these kind of... We were the vanguard of...
and then you went on tour, and then telly seemed to happen quite... I'm sure it didn't seem quick at the time, but reading the book, telly came a-calling quite soon.
Yeah, we were sort of in our early 20s, so it was quite quick, really. And we were kind of lucky because we'd sort of doing the Comic Strip Club. It was us and Dawn and Jennifer and Pete and Nige and Alexi Sale. And it got a lot of attention. And Channel 4 was starting up, and they came along and they had a whole kind of schedule to fill. So they wanted some new comedy because they were supposed to be a new channel. And then Paul Jackson at the BBC thought, oh, they're stealing all this talent, we better get a show. We got the offer of the Comic Strip and the Young Ones more or less on the same day, and they went out within a week of each other. We were in competition with ourselves, Graham.
And what I didn't realise, and I think this happened with Dawn and Jennifer as well, you were commissioned by the variety department, not the comedy department.
Yeah. Well, Paul Jackson made that because we needed... I mean, it wasn't Terry and June. There were a lot more effects, which needed a bigger budget. And if you went through the variety department, you got a bigger budget. But it also meant you had to have a band on.
Yeah.
So the reason there are bands on the Young Ones is simply a budgetary requirement.
And in the Young Ones, some of those stunts, I mean...
Yeah.
It was insane, the things you did.
My daughter read the book a few weeks ago, and she came up to me and she said, Dad, I never realised that you were never really a comedian. You were a stuntman. and I was, I think. Paul Jackson, the producer, always had the idea that if you had a big joke, you should do it in front of an audience and get the big laugh. So there's an episode of the Young Ones where Rik and I are fighting each other again, all around the house, calling each other virgin. And hey, Virgin, we're on Virgin Radio.
Hey,
see how
so on brand. So on brand.
And there's a bit where we crashed through the ceiling into the kind of kitchen set on a bed, and we did it for real. It's just bizarre to think of.
Because you fell about 20 feet.
25-foot drop in a kind of metal crate with some, boxes in it and a bit of bedding. And if you look very carefully, I mean, it's one shot. And if you look, we get out straight away and start fighting him. But if you really slow it down, you can see that we're absolutely winded.
A little shook.
Yeah.
One of the things I didn't understand about your career is that you started directing quite early. Like, the directing started with
the comic strip, yeah. I mean, we started writing there as well. So, and I just used to go in. I had a director called Sandy Johnson used to direct my episodes, and he just let me into the edit room, and I spent every time learning how films were made, and eventually got rid of him. So, I'm very sorry, Sandy. I'm going to do this for myself. Goodbye.
Yeah, taxi for Johnson.
Yeah. And I started directing, and I did the Second Bad News episode, and there was a video within it, and it went quite well. And then bands started asking me to make videos for them, so I did Zodiac Mind Warp and The Love Reaction, 3 Squeeze things. I did about 30 over a year.
Well, you did one in there's one in the book where you're in LA directing a music video on the Chaplin stage.
Yeah, and it was a band called The Innocence Mission, who bizarrely is still going despite my video, and we were shooting them. I was aware there's a kind of something going on, and a very big stage, the Chaplin stage. Someone had just come in, and everyone was there was a psychic kerfuffle, and I looked over, and it was Joni Mitchell, and I thought, that was weird. That's Joni Mitchell over there, and she was looking at me. Isn't that bizarre? And I was looking at her, and I thought, well, I can't really break the gaze first, because that would be rude, wouldn't it? She's a, multi-million selling artist, and I can't just turn back to this little girl who's only sold 5 albums. So I kept looking at her, and she started to stride towards me in a rather threatening manner, which broke into a run. Her fists kind of pumping like this, and I thought, I really don't know what's happened here, but it's gone very badly wrong, and I think she's going to hurt me. And by the time she eventually got to me, and she just threw her arms around me, hugged me in a in a way that I've very rarely been hugged, so just so tightly and lovingly. And I was thinking, she's got the wrong man. She thinks, that I'm Andy Summers from The Police, because we're both blonde and a bit ugly. But then she sort of held me at arm's length and came back in for a kiss. Kissed me on the lips.
Wow.
Platonic. And she held me and said, Adrian. So it was obviously me she meant. She said, Adrian, whenever we have young ones parties, I always play Vivian. Can you imagine that?
Is that amazing?
I'm thinking of Steve Stills as Rik and Neil Young as Neil, obviously.
Yeah. And you talk in the book how the young ones is kind of this thing,
It's a massive thing.
Yet in your life,
it took 14 weeks.
Yeah.
There's 12 episodes. It's a week an episode and a week on either end to kind of polish, do the costume fittings and a bit of location filming and sound. So it's I've talked about it much longer than I took making it.
Yeah.
And
do young
I used to get really cross about it.
Oh, sorry.
but I don't own it. I mean, I know what it's like to be a fan. I'm a fan of the Bonzo Dog Doodah Band, and I know absolutely every single line. So I could pester them forever. In fact, I did. And when people come up to me in the street and they say, they give me a line from the young ones and I don't know the answer, that I can see the huge disappointment in their face. But you're Vivian. And I think, well, I was. But it took up less than 0.5% of my life.